absolutely shocking. One of the finest journalists in the world and a close friend of the royal family has revealed that Prince Harry made Queen Elizabeth's final days a total misery.
Hugo Vickers has spent 5 decades reporting on the royal family, and now he's dropped something that hits hard. He even reveals that Queen Elizabeth II left behind insights about her final years that go way beyond rumors or gossip. This isn't guesswork. It's coming from someone who knew what was really going on. Vickers isn't just another voice chasing headlines. He's one of the most trusted royal biographers out there, with deep connections inside the family across generations. So when he speaks on what the Queen felt, people listen. And here's the shocker. Whenever Prince Harry called her, she reportedly asked her lady-in-waiting to stay in the room. That says a lot. Think about that for a second. A woman in her 90s, a global figure of strength, still doing her duties. Yet she didn't want to take a call from her own grandson alone. Not because she didn't care about him, and not out of fear, but because she felt the need for backup. A witness.
Now I'm going to give you the shocking, fresh details. You won't believe how Harry treated Elizabeth. But let's have a look at the context. Let's have a look at the background to this. Why did Harry make the Queen's life such a misery? In a word, Meghan. In 2 words, my husband.
It wasn't just about comfort. It was about protection. There was a real concern that anything said could later show up somewhere else. A book, a podcast, a documentary, you name it. So having someone there meant clarity, accountability, and proof of what was actually said. That's serious. And it didn't stop there. When Meghan Markle and Harry visited with their kids, the same rule applied. Someone stayed in the room. Again, not out of paranoia, but because private conversations had turned into something that needed to be documented. That's not normal family dynamics. That's tension on another level. This doesn't paint a picture of a small misunderstanding. It shows a deep breakdown of trust. A grandmother who once had a close bond now felt the need to protect herself in private moments. That shift didn't come out of nowhere. And the reasons? They're all out there in public. The memoir, the interviews, the media appearances, including the explosive sit-down with Oprah Winfrey. Piece by piece, a pattern formed, and it clearly left an impact.
So it's quite extraordinary that Harry should fall under Meghan's spell to such an extent that Elizabeth, who was a great leader, a great patriot, a great monarch, a great mother, a great human being, should become the enemy. How poisoned does your mind have to become? How polluted?
Vickers puts it bluntly, and his words hit hard. The distress caused in the Queen's final years cannot be overstated. Not exaggerated, not dramatic, just undeniable. And coming from someone who spent 50 years understanding this family, that statement carries serious weight. Now add everything else she was facing: the pandemic, the loss of Prince Philip after 73 years together, ongoing royal issues, all while continuing her duties like nothing had changed. And right in the middle of it all, that high-profile interview dropped, and everything escalated even more. The timing here is impossible to ignore. On March 7, 2021, just 6 days after Prince Philip went through heart surgery, everything exploded into public view. While he was still in hospital recovering, that now famous interview aired to millions, shaking the entire institution.
That Meghan was bullying undergardeners on the Windsor estate, right? These are guys, simple guys, with big hands, okay, rosy cheeks, friendly demeanor, right? Fat fingers, rural types, okay? Rustic, pastoral characters who come in and go, "Oh, hello, Mrs. Markle, do you want me to cut down that tree?"
During that interview with Oprah Winfrey, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle made claims that instantly dominated global headlines. They spoke about struggles inside the family, questioned support systems, and even suggested that an unnamed royal had made troubling remarks. The world was watching, and the pressure skyrocketed overnight. But here's the catch. The Queen couldn't just respond freely. Queen Elizabeth II followed a strict rule: never complain, never explain. No interviews, no public arguments, no direct pushback. She couldn't call the network or defend herself on camera. All she could do was release a carefully crafted statement, and that's exactly what she did. Recollections may vary. 3 simple words, but they hit hard. That phrase didn't escalate things, yet it didn't back down either. It acknowledged a disagreement without feeding the drama, kept her dignity intact, and quietly sent a message that not everything said should be taken at face value. Calm on the outside, but strong underneath. People close to her described it perfectly: a soft exterior hiding a firm core. That public response was controlled, polished, and precise. But behind closed doors, the reality was different, and voices like Hugo Vickers have now started revealing it. According to those accounts, the Queen once said, "And now Harry has opted out? And for what?" That question hits differently now.
Had to deal with. Did you think that she needed to do that when she's mourning the passing of poor old Prince Philip, the love of her life? Do you think she needed the hassle and the stress from Meghan when she's trying to lead the country and the Commonwealth and preserve the monarchy? Do you think she needed that when she had the Prince Andrew problem? Do you think she needed that when there was the massive global health crisis in 2020? She had so much to deal with.
Back around 2020 to 2021, it sounded like concern. But years later, it feels almost prophetic. Look at how things unfolded. Major roles disappeared, public image shifted, and the direction became unclear. That simple question, for what, still hangs in the air with no clear answer. And her firm stance? No half-in, half-out deal. She shut that idea down completely, and history shows she meant it. Now here's where it gets even more intense. Another respected voice, Sally Bedell Smith, brings in a completely separate perspective. She gained access to private diaries from Lady Elizabeth Anson, someone incredibly close to the Queen. These weren't public statements or polished interviews. These were private thoughts, written with no expectation of being seen. And what was written about Meghan before the wedding stands out in a big way.
Whether you think that she got a clean bill of health from that inquiry, let me tell you that if that inquiry was very kind about Meghan, we'd know about it. We'd have heard about it because it would have been fed through from the Sussex public relations machine, which is relentless and doesn't sleep. Also, alleged rows between William and Catherine and the Sussexes. The Queen had to deal with that. And this obnoxious woman.
Lady Anson reportedly described her as full of charm, but also warned she might be nothing but trouble. That contrast is hard to ignore. She also noted tensions within the family, especially between the couples, and even recorded a moment where Harry was said to have been rude to the Queen for several minutes. Looking back now, those early observations feel less like guesses and more like warning signs that were there from the very beginning. 10 minutes. That's how long the moment reportedly lasted. 10 full minutes of tension directed at a grandmother who also happened to be Queen Elizabeth II. Not a passing comment, not a quick disagreement. 10 minutes that were serious enough to be written down in a private diary. And not just any diary. This came from Lady Elizabeth Anson, one of the Queen's closest confidants, someone who knew the family inside out. What was said during that moment clearly stood out, because it didn't just fade away, it was documented. Then comes the line that really grabs attention. Lady Anson reportedly wrote, "We hope, but don't quite think that Meghan is in love. We think she engineered it all." That's not gossip. That's a private opinion recorded long before everything became public.
One of Meghan's scorched earth policy. That was clear messaging from Meghan, which is, I'm a disruptor. I don't even care about your rules. And in fact, I'm going to take your rules and I'm going to throw them in your face by being barefoot.
This wasn't written for headlines or attention. It wasn't leaked through media channels. It was a personal reflection, written before the wedding, before the interviews, before the global spotlight fully hit Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. And looking back now, it raises serious questions. Was everything planned from the start? That's something only Meghan truly knows. But what stands out is how those early doubts seem to line up with what happened next. Patterns, decisions, moves, they all start to connect in a way that's hard to ignore. Stories later reported by voices like Charlotte Griffiths and Duncan Larcombe add another layer. There were claims about plans, about direction, about a future that didn't fully match what was being said at the time. And suddenly, that word, engineered, starts to feel a lot more loaded. Then there's the bigger picture, a brand built around royal connections, while at the same time stepping away from the institution itself. That contrast alone keeps people talking. And the idea that this path was mapped out early, it keeps coming back into the conversation again and again.
Meghan allegedly says that Catherine's got the baby brain, which is so obnoxious. There's also a fresh development this week. Claims that when Meghan was at Frogmore, she didn't allow anybody to park their cars at a nearby sporting venue because you could see the car park from one of the windows of her Frogmore cottage.
But Lady Anson didn't stop there. Her final observation about Harry is just as striking. She reportedly wrote that, "The problem is that Harry is neither bright nor strong, and she's both." That's a bold statement. But remember, this came from someone who had known him his entire life. This wasn't written to attack or embarrass. It was a private view, never meant for public eyes. And yet, years later, people are comparing that opinion with what's actually happened and noticing the similarities. Over time, reports have described Harry as someone who reacts rather than leads, someone who follows the direction instead of setting it. Frustrations have been mentioned, disagreements hinted at, but the overall picture? It keeps pointing in the same direction. And here's what makes it even more intense. These aren't coming from one single source. Names like Hugo Vickers, Lady Elizabeth Anson, Sally Beadle Smith, and others, all from completely different angles, are adding pieces to the same story. Different perspectives, same pattern. What starts to form here is a very clear picture, and it's not a simple one. This was an institution that, at the beginning, showed real generosity. Rules were bent, traditions adjusted, and doors opened to welcome Prince Harry and Meghan Markle in a big way. They were invited to spend Christmas at Sandringham before marriage, a rare move. Symbolic gestures were made, including access to royal jewelry collections meant to build trust and connection. There were even attempts to explore a half-in, half-out role, something completely outside tradition. But in the end, Queen Elizabeth II drew a firm line. No compromises on that level. And what followed?
Has a family member that works in a hotel where the Sussexes stayed. And you bore out my story yesterday about how they're at each other's throats, they fight, especially over how to raise the kids. Mars ain't the kind of place to raise your kids. In fact, it's cold as hell.
That's where things took a sharp turn. Instead of quiet adjustment, there was a wave of public disclosures, interviews, and statements that kept the spotlight burning. According to voices like Hugo Vickers, this period became a source of distress for the Queen that cannot be overstated. That phrase keeps coming back, and it hits every time. Underneath all of it sits that one private observation from Lady Elizabeth Anson, the line that cuts through everything. The problem is that Harry is neither bright nor strong. She's both. It's blunt, it's personal, and it wasn't meant for the public, but now it's impossible to ignore. The question the Queen reportedly asked years ago, and for what, still hangs there. Looking at everything that's unfolded, there isn't a clear answer that fully explains the trade-offs. And that's what makes it so striking. But to really understand it, you have to go back to the beginning, because this didn't suddenly appear at the end. It started early. Even before the wedding, tensions were already showing. Lady Anson's diary suggests the Queen felt personally hurt during the planning process, not as a monarch, but as a grandmother. She reportedly felt left out of moments she expected to be part of. That's not protocol, that's personal. Then there were specific incidents that added fuel to the situation. Reports around the tiara selection, described by Robert Hardman, pointed to clashes behind the scenes. Staff following instructions, boundaries being enforced, and reactions that didn't go unnoticed. Still, the Queen kept trying. She made efforts, offered support, and worked through those around her to smooth things over. The goal seemed simple: make it work, keep it together. But what came back? More public exposure, more personal stories entering the spotlight, more private moments turning into global headlines. The pattern kept repeating, and it became harder to ignore.
Such a control freak, everything has got to be just so, to the point where she cannot tolerate one of the windows of her lovely Frogmore cottage overlooking a car park a mile away. I mean, that's just like, that's in the territory of OCD, isn't it? That is in the territory of personality disorder. It's pretty wild.
Now, the question about whether this was all planned or not remains open. No one outside can say for sure. But what stands out is that Lady Anson's private view, written with no audience in mind, leans strongly in one direction. And when you line that up with accounts from different people, different times, and different angles, a consistent pattern starts to appear. Reports of strong behavior with staff, that tense moment with the Queen, the shaping of a public narrative. All of it connects in a way that keeps raising eyebrows. More details keep stacking up, and they all seem to point in the same direction. Moments behind the scenes, across different places and times, showing a pattern that's hard to ignore. There were reports of meetings where cameras suddenly went off, leaving others in the dark. Situations where decisions didn't match what Prince Harry was said to want. Even social media posts appearing despite reported objections. One moment here, another there, but together, it starts to look like a clear trend. And when the same type of situation shows up again and again across different environments and witnessed by different people, it stops looking random. It starts looking consistent. And that's what makes it stand out.
We're on the line. Very similar. There's a pattern emerging here. What's happened is that Harry's been infiltrated, in my opinion, by Meghan, and he's become like an automaton. He's like a satellite state of Meghan now. He's like the host cell. Harry, is Meghan's useful idiot.
Then there's one of the smallest but most telling stories. Palace gardeners, described as simple, hardworking people who just cared about their work, reportedly found themselves on the receiving end of sharp criticism over something as minor as how flowers looked through a window. That detail hits differently, because these weren't public appearances or staged events. These were everyday moments with people who had no platform, no power, and no reason to expect attention. And in those quiet situations, behavior tends to show the real picture. It reportedly got to the point where Queen Elizabeth II stepped in herself. She had to explain that you don't treat staff that way, especially people simply doing their job with care and pride. That kind of intervention says a lot. And it doesn't stop there. There have been multiple mentions over time, stories about tensions with staff, accounts from production teams, reports from media collaborations, different industries, different settings, but similar descriptions keep surfacing. From behind-the-scenes issues during media projects, to comments from executives, to reports about how meetings were handled, it all adds layers to the same image. One moment alone might not mean much, but when they line up like this, it becomes harder to dismiss. Meanwhile, think about the contrast. Queen Elizabeth II spent over 70 years handling world leaders, major crises, and powerful personalities. She wasn't easily shaken, far from it. And yet, in her final years, she reportedly felt the need to have someone present during private calls with her own grandson. Not for formality, but for reassurance, for clarity, for support. That's not symbolic. That's personal. That's the real impact being described here. Not just headlines or public debate, but a private reality where trust had shifted so much that even a simple phone call wasn't simple anymore.
And accused an unnamed member of the royal family of racism. That aired whilst the Queen was very old and very poorly and worrying about the Duke of Edinburgh's health. And she's got to deal with the headlines from the Oprah interview. You don't accuse someone of racism, especially a member of the royal family that can't answer back because it's like never explain, never complain.
And then there's the timing again, because it matters. While Prince Philip was in hospital recovering from heart surgery during what would become the final stage of his life, that major interview was already set in motion. 6 days after his operation, with everything happening at once, the broadcast went live. And that detail raises questions, because this wasn't spontaneous. It was planned, scheduled, and executed at a moment when tensions were already at their highest. And when you connect that with earlier private observations, like those from Lady Elizabeth Anson, it starts to paint a bigger picture. One that keeps circling back to the same themes, the same patterns, and the same unanswered questions. This wasn't something that just happened overnight. It was planned, discussed, and set up over months. The decision to air that major interview during that exact week wasn't random. It happened while Prince Philip was seriously unwell, and it still went ahead. Prince Harry has said he didn't fully understand how serious the situation was at the time. Maybe that's true, maybe not. There's no way to fully confirm it from the outside. But what is clear is the timing and the impact it had on Queen Elizabeth II during an already intense moment. And how did she respond? With control. Total control. Recollections may vary. Just 3 words, but they carried weight. No drama, no escalation. Just calm, precise distance. Then she went right back to work like nothing happened. That's the level of discipline she operated on. Decades of service built that ability to absorb pressure without breaking, to stay composed no matter what was happening behind the scenes. Public calm, private strain. Because think about what she was dealing with all at once. Personal loss, global crisis, family tension, and still showing up every single day. That's not easy. That's strength on another level. But behind closed doors, the story sounds very different. Private words, never meant to be heard publicly, are now starting to surface, and they hit much harder.
The other issue was the name of Lilibet, which of course was a pet name for the Queen. And Hugo Vickers says to use the intimate family nickname for the Queen, used only by close members of the family, was insensitive to say the least.
According to accounts from people close to her, she was really upset and saddened. There are also claims that Harry had been rude during one moment, something that clearly left an impression. And then there's that line again, "We hope, but don't quite think that Meghan is in love. We think she engineered it all." That statement keeps coming back. And let's not forget the other sharp observation. The problem is that Harry is neither bright nor strong. These weren't public statements. These were private thoughts, protected for years by that strict, never explain, never complain approach. Now those protections are gone and multiple voices are speaking. Names like Hugo Vickers, Lady Elizabeth Anson, Sally Bedell Smith, Charlotte Griffiths, and Duncan Larcombe, all bringing pieces of the same story from different angles. And the picture they build? It challenges the idea that the Queen was ever the problem. Instead, it shows someone who kept trying, adjusting traditions, offering support, making space, while things around her kept shifting. Meanwhile, the question she reportedly asked still echoes, for what? Years later, that question hasn't fully gone away, because the results, mixed signals, changing directions, and a public image that keeps evolving. Reports of tensions, projects that didn't land as expected, partnerships shifting, it all adds up over time. And when you line that up with those early private observations, it creates a pattern that's hard to ignore. Whether those early judgments were fully right or not, one thing stands out: they weren't random. And 6 years later, they still feel surprisingly on point. The problem is that Harry is neither bright nor strong. She's both. That line stands out, sharp, direct, and impossible to ignore. Written privately by the Queen's closest confidant before the wedding, it now sits in the public record, and it hits harder than ever. Queen Elizabeth II is no longer here, but what remains are the accounts, the notes, and the voices of those who were actually there. And as more of these perspectives come out, a clearer version of events is starting to settle in, not shaped by headlines, but by patterns. History isn't built on one moment, it's built on repeated behavior over time. And what's being described now isn't random, it's consistent, layered, and coming from completely different directions. Here's where things get even more interesting. According to Hugo Vickers, the Queen often wanted a lady-in-waiting present during calls with Prince Harry. That alone says a lot, but it doesn't stop there. Reports suggest that even in business settings, similar precautions appeared. Ted Sarandos, a major figure in media, was said to prefer having legal presence during conversations. That's not coincidence. That's a pattern repeating itself in completely different environments. Think about that. From royal settings to global companies, the same response keeps showing up. Have someone there? Keep a record? Don't rely on memory alone. When that many unrelated people reach the same conclusion, it raises eyebrows. And it's not just one or two names. Across different teams, projects, and situations, media staff, production crews, internal teams, similar experiences have been described. Different places, same approach. That kind of pattern sends a clear message. Document everything. Keep things transparent, make sure there's clarity, and avoid confusion later. Because once something is said privately, it can quickly take on a different shape publicly. That's not how normal, easy relationships function. That's what happens when trust starts to shift and people begin protecting themselves in small but noticeable ways. Now compare that with how the Queen handled it. She didn't react publicly, didn't escalate, didn't break her approach. She relied on structure, tradition, and quiet control. A witness on the call, discipline in public, strength behind the scenes. That famous steel hand in a silk glove description fits perfectly here. Calm on the outside, but fully aware underneath. And then there are the smaller details that still say a lot. One report connected to Frogmore Cottage describes concerns over cars parked near a sporting area being visible from a window. Sounds minor, but the reaction reportedly led to those cars being moved much further away. It's a small moment, but it fits into the bigger picture. Because when you line up all these moments, big and small, across time and context, they don't feel isolated anymore. They start to connect. And that's where the real story begins to take shape. At first glance, this might seem like a small thing, just a minor detail, nothing serious. But look closer, and it actually reveals a much bigger pattern. It's not about one moment, it's about repeated behavior. From the gardeners to the tiara situation to bigger decisions later on, the same dynamic keeps showing up again and again. The idea that the environment should adjust, no matter who else is affected. Take that Frogmore situation. People using sports facilities they had every right to use were reportedly moved far away, just because the view from a window wasn't ideal. That's not about rules, that's about control. And it doesn't stop there. Staff doing their jobs with care reportedly faced criticism over small details like flower arrangements. Angela Kelly, following direct instructions from Queen Elizabeth II, was put in a difficult position during the tiara situation. These aren't random stories, they all connect. When patterns repeat this clearly, they stop looking like coincidence. And the Queen, who had dealt with every kind of personality over 70 years, recognized it for what it was. That's why she reportedly chose to have someone present during calls with Prince Harry. Not for formality, but because she understood the situation deeply. Now, let's be fair, there's always another side. Harry and Meghan Markle have denied many of these claims and will likely continue to do so. They've described critics as biased or having their own agenda, and that perspective is part of the story too. But here's what makes this different. The accounts being discussed don't come from one place. They come from multiple independent voices. Hugo Vickers, Lady Elizabeth Anson's private diary shared through Sally Bedell Smith, along with other first-hand accounts, all from people who were close to events at different times. These individuals aren't connected, not coordinating, not part of one narrative. Yet their descriptions keep aligning, and that's what gives them weight. When separate sources across years and situations describe similar experiences, it creates a pattern that's hard to dismiss. Add to that the public developments, media projects, shifting partnerships, internal tensions, and the picture becomes even clearer. So, what does it all point to? Not certainty, but probability. The idea that all of this is completely made up becomes harder to defend when the same themes keep appearing. And that brings everything back to one question. For what? The same question Queen Elizabeth II reportedly asked years ago. Looking at everything now, the career shifts, the public image changes, the ongoing tensions, that question still doesn't have a simple answer. Because the outcomes? They're mixed, evolving, and still unfolding in real time. What stands out most is this. Those early private observations, written long before everything became public, continue to line up with what followed. Whether they were completely right or not, they weren't random. And now, as more details come out, the story is being shaped not just by headlines, but by patterns, consistency, and time itself. Recollections may vary. That line still echoes. But alongside it, there are records, accounts, and perspectives that aren't fading away. And that's where the story stands right now. Still unfolding, still debated, but becoming clearer with every new piece. If you want the latest updates and real breakdowns like this every single day, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to Crown Clash. New videos drop daily with the freshest updates you don't want to miss.